That morning, I had said to Sister Lopes, is there any way we can buy some sugar cane? My big thing with my students every year is I make them eat raw sugar cane. You know, they have the experience of just taking this thing that looks like a stick and eating it. It's really delicious. It's a cool thing. It's fun. It's tradition. So she actually stopped at 3 or 4 different markets, and she didn't want to pay a lot of money. So we were like bartering the whole way back. And that really took about 15 to 20 minutes. Added it to our travel time, which I really thank God we did that and that she remembered that, because that made the difference of us being in those buildings and not being in those buildings at the time of the earthquake. What I remember, and you can ask them and they can add to this, is just this boom, this big, like, it sounded like rocks just banging against each other. It sounded like a shot. And the van stopped. And before you knew it, the van started rolling side to side. And, you know, we were like, what's going on? And people were just going crazy. And, you know, Megan has commented that the walls were just, you just watched them roll. And then it was over, but people were just, women were ripping off their shirts because they thought it was voodoo. They thought it was the apocalypse. They thought it was the end of the world. They're very uneducated. They had no idea what was going on. They were running, screaming. You saw buildings just crumbling down, dust in the distance. It was pandemonium. And so the van started moving up really slowly, and then I don't think we moved 500 feet before somebody came up to the van and told Sister Lopes that the school had fallen. And we just kept going, and the school had fallen. It was 3 stories. I'm sorry. 3 stories, and it had pancake down, and then it was built on a hill. So not only did it pancake down, it came down. Our guest house, when we got up there, which was 2 stories, brand new. The wing that we were in, it was beautiful. And it was totally destroyed. So there were children in the building and parents coming to dig through the rubble. And that whole night was spent, you know, with parents coming looking for their children, pulling people, teachers and children out from the rubble. What I remember is the chanting in the distance, the villages near us, just everybody chanting. We didn't know what they were doing, and just all night long they chanted. You'd get an aftershock and there'd be silence, and then they'd start chanting again.
It was very frustrating for me having some medical training and having children there with severe injuries, and all we had was ibuprofen and Tylenol. And you know, we were passing out ibuprofen and Tylenol, but there was a man there that had all his fingers off of one hand severed off. And to me, that's what's sticking with me, is that there's just no medical, I mean, I bet even today those children have had no pain medication except for what we gave them.
I have pretty good memories of the sounds parents were making when they found their children that whole first night. There was a kind of a mass gravesite that got set up right where we were, just for the school. And all night you could tell when parents found their children at that site. It was some terrible sounds.
The Haitian men, the fathers of these children, were the ones that were actually taking them out of the rubble. And from there, the children were passed off to the rest of us who were trying to keep them comfortable, out of shock, giving them water, keeping them warm, you know, holding children's heads in your lap so their heads aren't laying on the concrete. There were several that were really cold that we were, you know, holding their hands and rubbing their arms. Just doing what we could, which was really not that much to comfort them. You would just get them settled down where they, you know, they weren't visibly shaking from shock, and then somebody would come by and disturb them or pull their blanket off of them, and then they would, you know, they would visibly start shaking again from shock.
Throughout this whole night, you have to understand these aftershocks were consistently happening. I mean, every
Big
time
aftershocks.
big. I mean, where the whole place, and you hear parts of the buildings shifting, and you know, so everybody would get up and run, you know, and these children are there, and every time there was an aftershock, they'd start, you know, whimpering and crying again. So the whole process would start again. It was just,
it's like people would, you know, settle for a little bit, you know, and then there'd be an aftershock, and then everyone would, you know, like hysteria all over again.
I have no doubts that many of those children died.
I mean, we had to have had, what, like 50 or more wounded up there with us that night, and when the morning came, we were down to like 5.
But during the night, all these looters were coming up and trying to, you know, steal from us, or were coming up to loot us in the front, you know, as we're working with these children. They took select things, but one thing they missed was this pouch that I had all our important documentation, and I had buried it in the bottom. So when Mike pulled out the suitcase, it was open, the lock was gone, but you know, we had our passports, and that's the only reason we got out of there. So we hopped in the Jeep, went back to the UN. He offered to take us there. He offered to evacuate us to Miami that night. He had room, but one of our party had stayed back to guard the luggage and take care of Miriam's children, Gail, and we couldn't leave without her. And he couldn't, I asked him to stop, right? What?
I said, thank you for not leaving me.
I just couldn't do it. I told him, you know, she's 5 minutes down the road, you have to go that way anyway, can you stop? And he said, I know, I can't stop. The devastation was so vast that no matter what kind of aid was coming in, it would take a long time. And if people were looking for us, it would just take a really long time for them to find us, and we really wanted to leave. So we took a vote, and we decided to hire a driver, which we did. And we went down to the airport, and we spent the whole day in mob scenes and in chaos and being ordered around like we were cattle. I have nothing good to say, I'm sorry, about the American Embassy in Haiti. So it was absolutely mass chaos. Everybody was pushing for the door. We got within 5 feet of that door, and a riot broke out, and we were in the middle of it. They locked the door. They wouldn't let us in. It's only because this guy had this seizure, and we kept saying, are you going to help him? Are you going to help him? And this reporter came by and grabbed his arm, and Mike, well, Mike, go ahead.
This reporter who had a pass walked through first, and I had his arm, the other arm. I came through second, I guess, because I was white and American and looked kind of like a reporter, I suppose. They just didn't think anything of it, and I got inside. But I asked him to bring in these 3, and he told the guard it was okay. And then we brought them in.
When that door opened, all pandemonium broke loose. I mean, it was chaos. They had my suitcase. The people outside, they would not let go. So I'm trying to get in. The guard's pulling me in. I couldn't move. They had, you know, Megan had my shirt. We were all like had a chain going, so we wouldn't let go of each other. And they wouldn't let us in. And finally, the guard grabbed my suitcase and pulled me in. And Mike pulled Gail in. And then, you know, they were ready to close the door. And I said, we can't go without her. I cannot go without her. And the guard opened the door. And I mean, they pulled a chunk of hair like that big out of the back of her head. That's how bad it was.
Definitely the way I think it's changed a little bit. I think I've lost a lot of faith in emergency services in general. I've just lost a lot of that whole, if something happens, you can rely for someone to be there to help you.
So our goal and what we will be working for is to rebuild that school, because we feel without education there is no hope for Haiti.
If all 4 of you decided whether you'd be willing to go back?
I'd go back.
I'll get back.
Wow. This has not stopped us. It's just given us a serious bump in the road.